Brian here with Havoc Shield. We're taking some time to introduce the astonishing members of our new advisory board. We've been very serious about ensuring our products are designed with and by the best in the business, by those who have been in the job of defending companies, small and large. And for that reason, we assembled a group of professionals we trust to help us build the best cybersecurity program we possibly can for the millions of startups and small businesses out there in need of help. The reality of cyber threats today is that small companies are attacked just as often as large ones, but they don't often have the time or resources to defend themselves or benefit from the competitive advantages of a solid security stance. So the advisory board is designed to bring those resources to our customers through our company. You'll be hearing more from members throughout the year, but today I have the pleasure of introducing you to advisory board member Andy Bokor. Andy has a very storied career that I have been tracking for quite a long time, but we finally got the chance to personally meet during the period of time at which Havoc Shield was in the Techstars Accelerator, and Andy was a mentor. There's usually just one or two mentors that they set you up with, which they say will last a lifetime through many businesses. And judging by how just incredibly helpful Andy has been in our short period of time since Techstars, I think Andy certainly is, and I hope is one of those folks that will stick with us for a lifetime. So Andy, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So I know a good bit about your background, but the folks tuning in may not know as much. So can you tell us a little bit about your past experience? What drove you through your journey?
Sure. So started my career in product management. Graduated into a development role while I did my master's at DePaul. At the time, I was working for a local Chicago company, CCC Information Systems, which is at one point was owned by the Tolmans when I was there. And then while I was there, I actually got exposed to a position at Accenture. Back then it was Anderson Consulting. And it was in a group that they had that was their external connectivity group, which was responsible for connecting up firm resources with projects. And this was sort of in the 90s when firewalls and intrusion detection systems were sort of just coming out of mysterious black boxes at the command line, and the people were putting a GUI on it, and it was becoming, I think, a little more accessible to sort of like the average sort of sysadmin. And I got fascinated with it and started leaning in specifically on Checkpoint.
Mm-hmm.
ISS at the time, Real Secure from an intrusion detection perspective, Trend Micro. Some of these people are still around, some have been bought. But, and then when I was there, I was at a training for Checkpoint, and I got introduced to this company called Net, which was based out of Southfield, Michigan at the time. Joined their team, did some consulting, and sort of moved from like the application side on the development side, and moved into sort of like the network architecture, designing gateways, trying to protect small organizations, as well as building sort of like data center style environments, right? So at the time, people were still building racks of gear, hosting all their gear at colo facilities. And so we just sort of perfected that model. That company was ultimately sold to ISS. Mm-hmm. And then, I got the bug. I'm like, hey, look, we can do this ourselves. So I met some amazing people, not only from Accenture, but also at Nettrax, and we left, and we formed a company called Exalt. And that was, back in the sort of internet heyday when things were going completely crazy. And we grew to about $60 million in revenue in 18 months. And
wow.
150 people. So it was like, you probably couldn't replicate that at any other point in time, but that's sort of the sign of the times. Again, an incredible group of people with that team, and then one of the individuals that was with me that I met at Nettrax and came with us at Exalt, which was a company we formed. Ultimately, we started Trustwave. And we ran that for a good long while, and then ultimately sold it to Singtel. I departed at the time of the sale. And then ultimately I took a little bit of time off and then resurfaced with some former people from the glory days to start a company called
Sticking with your friends.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a commercial real estate focused app. And so we ran that for a number of years and then ultimately sold it in 2020. And so since then, and then I've been doing consulting. But so the vast majority of my career has been in information security.
The things that Trustwave has done, I mean, in big part were invented by you and your team. The foundation of that company is still very much in your hands, right? So like, what was the gap that you saw when you started Trustwave that you think was crucial to fill at the time?
Well, what was interesting is, so when we sold the company Exalt, it was bought by VeriSign. And then 9/11 hit, and people started trying to sort of, like, I guess, recalibrate their business model, given the the economic hardships. But we saw a lot of people sort of exiting a space where we thought there was an opportunity, right? Which was part value-added resellers, so providing sort of best-in-breed gateway architectures, but then combining it with super high-end technical people on the consulting side. So that was from an assessment standpoint, as well as like a penetration testing standpoint, and then a forensic standpoint. So there was this, and look, the gap still exists today. That's why there's such a need for Havoc Shield, right? There's honestly, this is hard stuff, right? And organizations struggle to find talented people. And so we felt that there was a solid opportunity. And, it took us a little while to sort of find sort of the right channel at Trustwave. And then ultimately, the inflection point was PCI. And then we sort of really sort of pressed into that opportunity, and sort of the rest is sort of history from there. I mean, it's sort of like wearing seatbelts. I mean, at this point, everyone knows you should, and sort of shame on you if you're not, right? So it's become table stakes. The reputational damage that can exist even at a small company for not doing sort of what's responsible with your users' data, or what have you, is expected, right? Consumers expect their information to be protected, and so I think organizations understand that, and I think where they struggle is just on the practical side. What's sort of remarkable is, I think a lot of those struggles have existed throughout my entire career, right? And maybe the awareness was less so. Maybe the sort of the magnitude of the breaches were not as great in sort of like the early 2000s, but they're certainly aware now with the making the headlines. And so solutions like Havoc Shield have to be not only accessible, easy to implement, but they have to cover the broad spectrum of attack vectors. And that's overwhelming for a lot of people. So I think what's come a long way, I think, is people like yourself bringing solutions to the table that make easy implementation more straightforward. As a small organization, you're so focused on just getting the business to go.
Right?
You want to make sure you're doing the right, and obviously, you're trying to be judicious with the financial side of it, right? And I think there's always been a little bit of a struggle that security is somewhat still of a cost center as opposed to sort of a revenue center. But I look at sort of like how we approached it, and we knew we needed to do it, but we needed tools that would make it easy for us to do, right? Because we still just we weren't going to go and make that our core business, or spend our time exclusively focused on building a secure environment. We had to build the core product, and then we had to think about security. And that's why we would have used, Havoc at the time if the product was aligned. But I mean, that's what we would have needed, really, to just make it easy to implement. Well, just bring my past experiences to bear, right? So, we made some mistakes, we did some things well, and if I can help you benefit as a result of my experience, I think that that would be my objective. I mean, I really like the company. I think the product's amazing. I think it solves a much needed problem, and so to the degree that I can be helpful, that's you know that helped me. I find it fascinating just being able to be involved in small organizations that are you against the world. That challenge is very motivating. I mean, what we saw a lot at Trustwave was like the fast food restaurants, right? Where
Okay.
all these like individual franchises were getting decimated from breaches, predominantly for credit card theft. And any one of these breaches were sizable enough that it could have taken the business down if
Yeah.
it wasn't for the fact that they were in fact the franchise and there was some protection on the sort of back end. But I mean, it's hard to unlearn sort of what you learn when you're on the other side and you sort of see the breaches. But I mean, a day doesn't go by where people are just doing dumb security stuff that they should know better, right? And you can just see sort of like they're just a couple of steps away from a potential breach.
Yep.
Whether that's asking for information in clear text.
Yeah.
So for a fact they're storing your credit card number somewhere.
Yeah.
Or
Can't unsee it.
yeah, or like the authentication is so weak that it's pretty trivial to sort of breach. But I think small businesses, especially retailers, are like we spoke about before. They're running a core business. In many cases, it's an afterthought. In many cases, there has to be some kind of compliance regime or some kind of regulatory authority sort of coming down on them to sort of force them to do the right thing. Despite the fact that they should be doing the right thing because there's all kinds of brand risk.
Mhm. Cool. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, but maybe if you can wrap up here with us. Do you have any advice for organizations out there, uh, you know, uh, on what to do to bolster their security program in the face of, what is an incredibly accelerating network of threats against them?
Yeah, I mean, using a product like Havoc Shield would be sort of my first recommendation, because the beautiful thing of it is it's, sort of like the TurboTax sort of style. So like you can consume it in sort of easy, digestible chunks. It's going to cover all the sort of facets of sort of the best practices that you want to undertake. And so that's a lot less onerous than, hey, go survey 5 firewalls or a bunch of authentication systems or a whole bunch of password managers. What you guys have done is sort of assembled sort of the best of breed and put it in a way for a small organization to really sort of address it. So that would be my advice. I mean, take a look at the product and I'm sure you'll make progress just by going through the wizard.
Yeah, I think the assessment at the beginning is super valuable, and we haven't done yet as much as we want to on exposing this fact. But you can actually come in under a trial and run through our threat assessment, which is designed and reviewed with other members of the advisory board and other members in the security community. It's a professional assessment that helps curate a plan about what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't use us, you don't convert to the trial, you don't use any of the modules or any of the vendors or anything like that, just going through that few minutes of getting that top line assessment done and then seeing, hey, here are the priorities that I should be working on. Man, that's valuable, right? And if you've got a smart, IT person who can help kind of work their way through that, that's great. We obviously think you should use us because we can make that a whole lot more streamlined of a process. But even just going through that assessment to begin with is going to save those Taco Bell franchises a good bit in the near future.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, Andy. Well, this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.